So yesterday we have seen how this get, post, put, delete, the basic CRUD operations, right, works. We have seen only the APIs. Now let's see, have a quick look on sample code, so that we can actually relate, how that CRUD operations can be implemented in the code. So I have some, SpringBoot application sample code with me. So I'll be walking you all through that code, and I'll show you actually how we can implement a very basic CRUD operation. Yeah, intention here is not to teach you Spring Boot. So I will not go through or give any detailed information about Spring Boot, but I will only show you whatever we have learned, how it has been implemented. Okay, so maybe after saying that, if you in your project, whatever application you are testing, you will be having a better idea, like how it's basically joining the dots between what the implementation is and what is the code. Okay, so I have basically two sample examples. One, Spring Boot with its internal database, connected to its internal database, and one connecting to MySQL database. So I will show you MySQL database code. Whatever I got is a little bit older, but yeah, I just want to show you that flow once. So this is a actually very basic example. Okay, let's start with the model. So this is the employee model. Okay, so what they have done is they have created an employee class, basically employee model class. So if you recall, right, so when we were doing the CRUD operation, so we are passing some parameters, right, like name or phone number, like that, age and all. So similarly, they have modeled one employee class. It has ID, first name, last name, and gender. Okay, so and this is again a simple, they have added getter and setter method for that. You can see here for each attribute they have added a getter and setter. So this model, they'll be using it to get the details from the user, basically. What exactly this particular CRUD operation will be doing, it will be creating an employee, okay, with this 4 fields like first name, last name, gender, and ID. Yeah, ID mostly they will not show to the user, that will be internal, but yeah, first name, last name, and gender, the user will be passing it, okay, as we have done yesterday. And then it has to be mapped to the database. So we have a controller class, okay, here. So if you see here, they have they are defining actually the endpoints. For example, the first one is get employees. Okay, so get employees means it will return all the employees. Okay, whatever you are creating using post request, right? So it will return all the employees. And then it has another endpoint, which is also a get. Okay, so that is only get employee. That means it will fetch the employee details based on the ID. So that method takes ID as parameter. So we will, I think yesterday I have not covered the query and path parameter. I will cover it today, but just, for time being, this, consider that, suppose you have added ID 1, so it should return the employee with ID 1. And mapping you have already seen in the model. Okay. Next is like, this is add employee. First two are get request. Now you can see add employee is method is post, right? So what it will do, it will create a new employee record in the database. Okay, so again, the parameters you can see, first name, last name, gender. Our next method is for update employee, right? So as we have seen yesterday, for update we use HTTP put. So again, when we want to update, we need to pass the ID, right? So as yesterday in the example, we are passing the ID. So this method also is taking the ID parameter, and based on the ID, it is updating the record. Okay. Then the last one is delete. So request method is delete and parameter is ID. It is deleting the record. We covered the model, we covered the controller. So there is a service class here. If you see the service class, this particular code is actually using MySQL DB. So what it is doing here, it is writing the raw queries for all those methods. Okay, so for example, get all employees, right? So what will be the raw query? That will be nothing but select star from employees. If you consider like employees is the table name. Okay, so similarly, it is if you want to get the particular employee, right? So with the ID, just write this query, select star from employee where ID equal to that particular ID. Okay, then when we do the insert of post operations, right? So we need to actually create. The query is, as I told, insert into employees and the values. So values, anyway we are passing in a query string. So values will be updating here. And when this is executed in the database, record will get created. And then we have update and delete similarly. So update means update query, update employee, set first name equal to like whatever updated values. And then we have delete. Basically, it is like one-on-one mapping between those methods and the database. Okay, this is how the implementation is. Okay, so you have a model basically. So model is nothing but your Pojo kind of class, which will be having all the fields which you want to implement, and that fields we need to also add in the UI. Suppose the client application, right? So post request has to come from any client request, right? So client, if you consider client is a web application, so we have to implement that form, right? So from where client can submit the data. So we have to give maybe text box according to your data type of those fields, text box, first name, last name, everything you have to give. And when the user submit that form, the post request should hit the server, and server will know which method to call, right? According to the controller logic, server will call the corresponding method and it will do the operation. This is what is happening in the background or in the backend. Okay, for a simple Spring Boot application. If you use any other technology also, the logic may not change drastically because everywhere it is same, right? You have a controller, you have a model that we need to create, and then we have to link the controller action to the database. Sounds good. Okay, so I want to quickly show you another Spring Boot. That is, this is little bit older code, and I'll show you one latest one. So in this application, they are using actually Spring internal database. So there is no external database connection. Okay, so similarly in entities, right? So it has a user entity. Yesterday we also discussed, right, mandatory parameters, right? Suppose what will happen if user is not passing something mandatory, right? So I was telling like, okay, we can handle that in the code. For example, this particular user entity, you want to make the name as mandatory. So you can actually, add constraints here using code. So this class has only two things. One is name and one is email, and both are mandatory. So all other things are same, like, set ID, get ID, right? Set name, set email, then getters. This is the main entity class. Then we have a repositories class. So if you see here, user repository actually extending from an interface. CRUD repository user. So we are not actually writing any SQL code here, as you have seen in the older code, right? So what it will do internally, basically, the CRUD operation sequence, right? So it will generate. The Spring will take care of that. Okay, so basic CRUD operations it will generate. And if you want like some additional things, right? So for example, I want something like find by name. So I want to add an additional filter. So in that case, I can add my implementation, but otherwise, all the basic post, put, delete, get thing will be taken care. Okay, so I have a controller class here. So yeah, basically, they are creating some endpoints like index. For example, it will show all the users, right? Find all. See, if you see here, right, user repository dot find all, right? But we have not added any find all logic. How this will be implemented? So Spring will take care of it. It will add a method called find all, and we should be able to call it using the users entity or users model. Similarly, sign up. So what sign up they want to do, right? Sign up means this is a user interface which we are going to give. This has a user interface also. I'll show you that. So user interface means you are giving a page to the user to enter that details like name and email. And from that details, it will hit the server. Then we have add user. And add user is same, like it will be post, edit user, update user, and delete user. You can see something called in the return statement redirect. That means after doing some operation, it is redirecting to a page basically, right? So index means here we have already implemented index. Index is nothing but it will show you the list of users. Let me show you the template class. This is the actually page they have created. That means you can enter name, email, edit, and delete. Now you can see there is no user. Once you add some users, you should be able to see. I mean, I have not deployed the application. This is just a raw HTML template. Then I have add user. You can see here, right? Name and email field is there. So when we click on this add user, it should trigger the post request. And you can handle it in the JavaScript also in the front end. If you want to use it in the handle it in the back end, you can see here in the entity class, they have already added it. Message name is mandatory. Message email is mandatory. Front end, okay. So yeah, again we so I want to open this in text editor. Okay, you can see here this is pure HTML, and there's a form basically, right? So, and you can see here the action, that update endpoint, right? I was talking about. we have implemented that update endpoint with ID as a parameter, and method is post. Now again, although you will be you can actually do update with post also. Okay, so not necessarily like you are doing update with put, but yeah, here they have implemented with post, but as a best practice we follow update should be linked to put. And here if you see submit, right? So this is a submit form, and once you submit it, then it will send a request. Then for add user, similarly we have a form, and you can see here what is the action. It is as user endpoint, method is post. Then all the labels are there, and submit but action is there. Once you submit, this action should trigger basically. And what is there in the index.html? So this is again a plain form, like name, email, edit, delete, all the options, and it is basically retrieving the data and showing it, and it is also giving like edit or delete option, right? As we have seen here, index.html, if I open it raw, you can see all these options are there. Now at least I think you all be having at least clear picture of the entire thing, how it works basically, right? From the front end, from the perspective, and from the back end perspective.